Hey everybody, it's Devin Francis, also known as Dr. Blackgaard.
And I hope y'all are enjoying the spooky season. Whoa.
It is time for a spooky tale of murder and espionage. It's episode
And
194.
almost Jack, but not quite.
Not quite.
Won't let me have it yet.
Everything but.
Neither series, Young Whit or Blackgaard, wants to give me Jack. They keep on teasing me.
Yeah, this is about as teasy of Jack as you can get. He's like, you literally missed him by weeks.
Yeah.
Um,
You do the summary because I read this the night it released. Basically, there was a random night a couple weeks ago where I was just like, hey, I'm pretty sure the Blackgaard book was supposed to come out in October. And then I Googled it, and then it was like, the Blackgaard book came out 2 minutes ago. And I was like, wow, that's amazing timing. And I read the whole thing in like 2 hours.
okay, so
So that was a couple weeks ago.
this
So
is
you do the summary.
episode 194. This is Blackgaard novel number 5, Night Scheme. Is that what it was? I assume you have it
Uh,
open.
Give me a sec. My Kindle's right beside me.
Written by Phil Lawler. So, this is the Waylaid book.
Yes, Night Scheme.
And Waylaid starts about 40% of the way into the book because this is our first like time jump between sections. So we have a lot of like, we already knew that there was going to be like, oh, there's information, like there's leading up Blackgaard Chronicles saga stuff that happens in between. But also, there's so much extra plot that we need to stuff in there now that connects
They're
things on like
hyping up
18,
a name, not a number so much.
18 more levels of tangled web of intrigue and connections between people than we ever could have conceived that this series would have. So once
I was really lazy with the highlighting compared to usual
highlighted
because I read it so
one
fast.
thing.
There's one highlight, and it's just something I thought was funny that wasn't in the original Waylaid, and that's why I highlighted it.
Yeah, so the plot is a bunch of random scenes happen and then Waylaid happens. Let's talk about the book. I just want to get into it. So
Devin was so excited when he messaged me last night. So the series has been very Richard heavy. This one has the least amount of Richard, which I figured it would. But it did. I was hoping that it would have some Richard content before the sewer scene of him trailing his friend, and it did. It had Richard being the most unincognito, so proud of himself for his stealth skills, despite how obvious it is that he's tracking someone, just like wearing a baseball cap and a jacket and sitting in a cafe staring outside the street at people who are like going in and out of Blackgaard's, like out of buildings and stuff he thinks are kind of suspicious, and then trailing someone on the train. He's like, no one will find me, and then he just like stalks out Blackgaard's building for
but then
like
he had to like
2 weeks.
sprint after Greg Kelly to not lose him after he got off the train.
He was so proud of himself too. He was just like stealth expert Richard Maxwell extraordinaire.
Okay. So, first chapter we've already read before. We talked about it last time because it was a preview at the end of the last book, wherein Whit comes back to Blackgaard's castle several weeks after the fire, and he was like, where did Blackgaard go? Because he allegedly ran into the downstairs door, but they never found any trace of him, and the police were like, oh, I must have gone upstairs, and he, I don't know, jumped out a window or something.
They like figured out where he escaped because that's where Sasha went or something like that.
But Lucy had found the hidden door, and so Whit looks around. He finds the door. He finds Blackgaard's secret Victorian-era lab hidden in the basement, and the tunnel, and the boxes that say, like, Edgebiter, but, like, they're all, like, obscured and, like, ripped off and covered over and stuff like that. The map of the passageways that used to belong to him, and he'd sent it to Jack, and he's like, how did he get this? Which we were very confused about, because we're like, how did he get that? Like, did he just intercept Whit's mail? Did he steal it from Jack? Is Jack working with
Also,
Blackgaard the
this
whole time?
book went over something that the show also mentioned, but never really made sense to me.
What?
Where Whit said, like, after the whole Clara incident, but before he actually, like, made up with Jack, he would just, like, send Jack old antique things.
Uh-huh.
And I was just like, why did you do that if you obviously had a bad relationship with him and he wasn't talking to you?
He was
Would
trying
you
to
just,
make up
like,
with him.
send him all this stuff? I know, but, like, it never really made sense to me that,
like
like,
it was pretty
Jack would
obvious
think that Whit still, like, intensely hated him when he's sending him, like, all this stuff. And, like, when also the points, like, when did Whit send him these things? What were the things Whit sent him? So that kind of, like, touches on that more in this book. So I liked that. Also, it does
I don't
One Bad
understand what your
Apple.
confusion was
I
about
just
this.
I don't know. I always thought it was kind of weird that he was just sending Jack a bunch of stuff just randomly.
Well, he was
basically.
trying to make up with his best friend.
Yeah, I know,
That seems
but
pretty obvious.
whatever. Then, like, One Bad Apple happens, and then Whit sees the edge biter,
He figures
and he
it out
immediately
immediately.
figures it out. I was thinking, like, I don't know about you, but I was like 50-50 on I don't know if they're gonna let Whit figure it out.
I
Right
didn't
away
think
or
it was
not.
going to happen until like Tom Vermeer, maybe.
Yeah, I was thinking, like, it'll probably wait a little bit, but it's so
Because he only
obvious
had
that
4
even though they'll
letters.
probably wait, it will really bother me. But then Whit figures it out immediately, and then he's just like, I'm just gonna sit on this information.
Whit
And I was
figures
just
out
like, why would you do
so
that?
much
But then I,
stuff.
like, thought of the Rydell revelations and how awful Whit's been lately, and I was like, you know what? Actually, mister, I'm gonna just sit back and watch the world burn. Yes, this is apparently an in-character choice for you.
There is a million points in here where Whit like figures out things so far ahead that like, oh, this is related to Blackgaard. He's doing some galaxy brain like 18 moves ahead play here, and he figures it out, but he just like sits on it to see like what's going on, and he knows.
It made me so mad.
From the end of Applesauce, he's already like, even though this is a huge thing, he's like, this isn't even what he's after. This is all part of something even bigger. And then he does figure out like, oh, this is about the mineral. Like he figures that out basically when Edgebiter happens, and he was like,
He figures
really
it out at the
freaking
very
out.
beginning of the book, and I was just kind of sitting there. I was like, well, I wonder what the rest of the Blackgaard Chronicle books are going to be about, because we
There's
just
a lot of really
we just did it, folks.
there's
We
a
know
lot
what
of
the end goal is.
really interesting implications here. Well, I mean, Whit doesn't say it to the audience, obviously.
I know, but we still think how many books we still have left, and the fact that, like, you kind of figure it out at the beginning of, like, Darkness Before Dawn, and
Well,
the
I
fact
know,
that, like, Whit's figuring it out now, it's gonna be, like, so infuriatingly obvious to, like, first-time readers, like, what's going
no, 'cause they
on.
still
I mean, like,
won't know about it.
I know this book series is, like, for people who
Well, no, I'm
do
saying
listen
if
to
you
the
don't
show,
know
but-
Darkness Before Dawn, you're still probably not gonna figure it out just based on that if you don't already know what's gonna happen. And it's not like it bears it on the plot, because Whit isn't there when Darkness Before Dawn happens.
I realized in this book, this is going to sound so bad. I don't really care. I like Tasha so much more when I can't hear her talking, and I'm just, like, reading the words, like, on the page. I think maybe I just don't like her
The
voice
VA?
actresses. Maybe that might have to do with my strange dislike for Tasha. I really don't know what my deal is with Tasha.
I don't either.
I don't know. I think it might have to do with her VAs, honestly.
Okay, so
That I just don't like them.
I have a lot of notes to get through. So, going through scene by scene, we see next Blackgaard. He is in the Netherlands. It is like 4 months later, I think, after the incident. He is talking to his boss. So it's very interesting. We knew that Blackgaard had several buyers lined up, but we've never heard in the show before of the Center for Scientific Understanding. They're apparently the ones who have been funding his work this entire time, and they're clearly very connected to Mongol. So it very much sounds like they're one of those classic fictional, like, crazy occult fringe science groups that's like, we're a science group, but secretly, like, all our stuff is like we're trying to find like mystical artifacts from
Like
like.
Scientology, kind of.
Well, I'm thinking of like Trinity in Tomb Raider, or the Templars in Assassin's Creed, or
It's like all the games I haven't
or like
played.
Hydra in like classic Marvel. Like, basically these groups that are like, we investigate science, but like in ways that we're actually
Evil
like looking.
science.
Yeah, we're actually trying to find like mystical artifacts that no one thinks are real, but we think they're real, and we're going to do science on them and use them to take over the world. Is very much the vibe.
And also, like, Professor Mongol's basically considered, like, all but said to be their founder, and it's like, yeah, that tracks.
And here's the thing: when you have a name like the Center for Scientific Understanding, typically when you have a name for a group that's like, we do science in an extremely generic context, most of the time it's like a
Evil.
wacko think tank. Like, and so it all fit together so well of like, this is exactly what's going on here. So they've been funding his work.
I actually kind of felt
Mongol
for
found them
Blackgaard in this
because
scene,
of the cloth.
which I didn't expect. They're like, we're gonna take away your funding and
Yeah.
stuff like that, and he's like, then I'll never be able to fulfill like my mentor's wishes and stuff. And they're like, we don't care.
Yeah, they talk about how like they have all of the papers from Professor M, and they're like, well, we're not going to give them back to you because someone else might give us some money for them, and you don't have money. And like a bunch of us didn't even believe in what Professor M was talking about because like it was so crazy and stuff like that. And I'm like, it's literally just, it's all exactly what we've been saying the whole time.
I actually really enjoyed all the Blackgaard POV parts in this book.
Yeah.
This book was probably the most heavy new Blackgaard content, just like by himself out of all the books so far.
Everything together so much more than expected.
And like all of his time spent in the agency finally like made so much more sense than they ever did in the first place.
They, like, I know when we were talking about the technology with the computers before, it's like, man, this series is really dated. But then when Blackgaard is talking to the chairman, at first when he was saying, he was just addressing him as like chairman, and I was like, I swear, if they try and make this be the chairman of Andromeda, I'm gonna lose my mind. It would be hard to confirm that without being super obvious, though, because we don't have any name for the chairman, first or last, or anything like that.
And also, Novacom isn't going to happen for like a decade.
I know,
basically.
but they're tying things across long time spans here.
I know, but like still.
So we thought things were dated before, and then we literally watched Blackgaard learn in real time that the USSR is dissolving. Like, if that doesn't make you appreciate how long Adventures in Odyssey has been running, I don't know what would.
Honestly, I was kind of surprised by that because I thought the USSR dissolved like way earlier than that.
I thought it was a bit earlier than that. Definitely earlier than the 90s.
Yeah.
You look up what year the USSR fell apart while I keep talking.
You talk. You have more notes than me.
So, Blackgaard, I mean, there's lots of notes where I'm predicting things that are going to happen that you guys already know are going to happen because it gets confirmed.
1991, December 25th. Oh no, Christmas!
Huh.
Oh, that was probably a bad Christmas for a lot of people.
Okay, so Blackgaard talks about like how Hakim, who is his chemist before, who's working underneath the castle, like has wealthy friends with oil money in the Middle East. And I was like, oh, Red Scorpion, Rakistan, this is how he's going to meet Mustafa and stuff. And so I'm like, so he met Red Scorpion so that they would be able to give him the money to buy back Professor Mongol's papers so that he could get the research.
That's such an ordeal, though, just to get the money for it.
And it gets worse.
That's true. Blackgaard's like, I'm new in the agency, and it gets worse.
I mean, in the end, the plot is basically he's stealing the laptop from the Department of Defense, which just happens to have applesauce on it, which he doesn't even know. He's stealing the laptop in order to get in with the European Security Agency as a
Which
triple...
might not even still end up accepting him, even if he does give them
as
the
a
laptop.
triple agent to get into Red Scorpion so that he can use the money to buy Professor M's papers from the COSU so that he can get the information on the mineral under Wit's End. It's every single piece of Blackgaard Saga is like, it was just one big chain of fetch quests for him.
Oh my gosh, you're right.
And I mean, I was very impressed. Like, in my wildest fanfic dreams, I couldn't have imagined a tangled enough web to justify being able to tie all of these things together, not just by like, these are different ways that he tried to do stuff, but like, these were all caused by like the same thread of like,
you know what it is? It's
driving
like
into these
it's
things.
like Nomura being like, you know what? I wanted Ansem and Xemnas to lose because it meant Xehanort would come back, and that meant Kingdom Hearts 3 could happen. It was all on purpose.
So Jason and Wilson show up in Providence, which I was certainly not expecting. And
I was just thinking, like, people only reading the books, like, both series for some reason, and haven't listened to any of the shows, and hear that, like, Wilson became a pastor, and he's Jason's uncle.
It would be weird.
It would be weird
if they were only reading the books.
I know, but, like...
But yes, that's fair.
Yeah.
So the fact that we see them was cool, but the fact that we were getting scenes set in Providence immediately set off bells in my head that like...
And it was set in the diner from the last book?
Yeah, Hoops Diner, yeah. But the fact that we were getting scenes set in Providence immediately set off bells in my head that this is just like... This is further narrative hints that like we are going to have plot stuff that is going to be tying back to Mongol and the cloth, because these are all things that are related to Providence, and so they're introducing it as a setting in this series. It's cool that we finally learned more about Jack's timeline and what happened to him between Clara and Gone but Not Forgotten. That we started.
It made me so sad that like Wilson was like, he tried to set up an antique store in Providence, but no one gave a crap.
Well,
so
here's
then
the thing, Victoria. There's like 20 people who live in Providence, so.
I mean, I guess that's true.
I literally, because I was just listening to the new Young Whit AIOC episode, I have the map of Providence open on my screen right now. There is like 30 houses in this town. So, granted, this was in the 30s. It might be a little bit bigger now, but still.
No, it's actually gotten smaller, believe it or not.
Oh, no. It's because the town's
now there's
so
10
racist.
houses.
And as we learned in the new episode, also sexist. I
mean, are you really surprised after reading the first Young Whit book?
No, obviously not, but really, like, hammering it home. Anyways, so the map of the tunnels.
They're like, and our sexist ways are important to us.
Yeah, they're like,
and we won't
son,
budge.
this is the South, and you won't understand that our misogyny is more important to us than the truth. And I was like, wow, they're just going to come out and say it, huh? Anyways, that's next episode.
Go listen to the Young Whit episode, guys.
Whit did nothing wrong in this episode. Wrong reasons, but he did the right thing at the right time.
And he's just like, Whit, have you ever considered what sexism is like for me? And Whit's like, bad because you're a girl? She's like, no, my family relies on sexism to put bread on the table.
And that's living in the South. Anyway, so the map of the tunnels was not only stolen from Jack, but it was stolen from the Granville mansion itself, because that's where Jack set up his antique shop. And I was like, I'm going bonkers yonkers over here.
I can't remember what the Granville mansion is. Is that where like
it's
gold was?
It's the big creepy house that the gold was behind, and it's where like the casket with the still was under the floorboards.
The floor broke.
Yeah.
Okay,
and
so
Whit
Jack
saw
fixed
the
it
coffin.
up. Good for him.
The coffin was underneath it that had the still inside of it and stuff. The big spooky
mansion. Do you think that's why
mansion.
no one bought from his antique store? Because it was 100% haunted.
Probably. I mean, isn't that what you want out of an antique store? That's why they sell dolls.
Because that's true. Do you think, like, you can charge more for the items in your antique store if it's haunted?
Yes. That's why they invented eBay. So, yeah, it's a very small world, and very recent, too. They were like, yeah, Jack moved away, like, 3 weeks ago. And that they got the map. It was so incredibly recent that it seemed like, man, this barely fits in the time span of, like, when Blackgaard was doing all this stuff. Like, Okay.
Can I
So,
just say really quick, unrelated to anything, but I think you'll think it's funny. I accidentally fell asleep in the middle of the day on Monday, and it was mid me listening to the Mabimbam that came out that day.
uh-huh.
So when Justin started singing like the Munch Squad song, I remember like really quietly mumbling the word munch twice, and that's the last thing I remember before I fell asleep for like 2 or 3 hours. I woke up and I was just like listening to a really old Mabimbam because they were still playing the whole time I was asleep.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, I listened to a Munch Squad, and the sheer power of Justin singing made me lose
I also,
consciousness.
did you just say saying munch twice instead of squad twice?
Sorry, Squad. I
Because I
said
just read,
Squad and then
I
I
want to
passed out.
munch. Munch. That's how tired you were.
Yeah, I like said Squad
Uh-huh.
and then I passed out.
So we're definitely approaching the point where my brain started melting down, trying to like connect all of this new information and all the layers of intrigue, because we now find out. So we get Tasha talking to Hans Tesler about developing TA418. So we find out that this whole time she wasn't working on it with Whit. She was using applesauce to do the molecular stability stabilization simulations, which is what I always theorized that she was using to develop it. But it wasn't with Whit. She was using the copy of applesauce that she stole from his computer with the bug that they had planted in Whit's end that we found out in the last book. And so she's secretly been working on it with her secret copy of applesauce. And she's talking to Hans Tesler about it, who is the lead researcher on Ruku, who worked with Tasha, and then he ended up betraying them and like selling it to Red Scorpion, and that's how Mustafa got it. So we find out that Hans Tesler also knew Professor Mongol and knows about the COSU, because he's like, I feel like there's a connection to Ruku and the TA stabilizing agent that we're working on, and some papers that Professor M had that the COSU has. And I'm like, this is such a tangled
You know that
web.
like Connect 4 meme where you like Photoshop
Yeah,
the Connect 4 box?
I'm
Make
familiar.
it like Blackgaard and Whit on the chess table from the first book's cover, and it's like connect the plot points, and it's just like dropping the word Professor Mongol into like Mustafa.
I was going to
and
say
stuff.
Connect 4, but you just put Pepe Silvia over. That's what I felt like reading this. So I really loved the like narrative storytelling of keeping us in anticipation of how close they are to stumbling on the formula, which feels like it should be still several years out from this point in terms of the gap between Waylaid and Name Not a Number.
Also, the fact that Tasha like knew that everything going on in Chicago was really sketchy, except for if she wanted to be able to do anything with TA418, she had to give like applesauce to all the people who she knew were
so
the
that's
bad
the thing.
guys.
The guy who commissioned the military control part of applesauce was General Howell, who's just like an idiot, and Tasha's like, I took it and I'm using it, but I do not want to give it to him. And Donovan is like, well, if you want to keep it, you have to give it to him.
He's like, you have to share applesauce with the rest of the class because
Exactly.
no one else
And she
brought
was
snacks,
like,
and you did.
I don't have time to try and divvy it up so that he only has the parts that aren't super dangerous that he commissioned. And he was like, well, you have to give it to him. And so they give General Howell applesauce. And like, I'm sure this won't have any consequences. And then Tasha goes straight to Geneva because she already, knows about Red Scorpion and that Mustafa is frequenting Geneva and that there's a chance that Hans Tesler might defect to work with Red Scorpion.
Donovan was like, Tasha, I need you to go to Geneva. And she's like, okay, but like for a day, right? And he was like, oh, honey, no. Like, I never realized, like, it's so crazy to think, like, A Name Not a Number is still, like, a way off.
That's what I'm talking about.
Albums. Like, she's been in Geneva for so long. Give her a break.
That's literally what I was saying in my notes here. They tease how close we are to stumbling on the formula because they're at the end of the conversation before Hans Tesler hangs up. He's like, what number are we on now, by the way? And Tasha's like, TA415. So they're teasing to us like, oh, they're only 3 away. It's so close. I'm like, isn't it still years away before Name Not a Number happens? How slow?
Like, it's so long, and they're like, we need you in Geneva. And I was like, she's going to be in Geneva for such a long time.
I was like, how long is it going to take them to work on 3 more compounds if they've already tried 415 so far? Anyways, that's
Those
a
were the easy
lot of time
ones.
because it sounds like we're less than a year. Yeah, we are less than a year out from applesauce because Waylaid happens 2 years after applesauce. So,
Yeah.
this explains the timeline a lot better about how Tasha was using applesauce to figure out TA418 because Whit allegedly deleted it at the end of album 5, but Tasha definitely should have been working on it after that. So now we understand it's because she ganked a copy from Whit's computer to run her biochemical stability sims, which, given that, it was very gracious of Tasha to continue putting Whit's middle initial into the name of the compound, given that the only work he contributed was the program that she stole to develop it and did it without telling him. I always forget that the TA stands for Tasha Avery 418.
Do you think like she thought Whit would be mad and then Whit found out? He's like, Tasha, what did you do? That was my
Clearly.
program. She's like, but I put your name on it. And he's like, oh, I guess it wasn't copyright. The problem, it was...
He's
I can't
like,
copyright strike.
Yeah, he's like, you literally
It wasn't
created...
plagiarism if you put my name on it too.
And Whit's like, so you're saying that you created like a global bioweapon and you put my name on it to implicate me?
And Tasha was like, yeah, do you want to see me test it? And Whit's just like, yes. I want to see what happens to everyone, and I'll tell no one about what's going on.
It's ironic that she spent so much time working on it in Geneva, birthplace of the Geneva Conventions, which specifically prohibits.
She started
these
working
kinds
on
of
it before
bioweapons.
Geneva.
Anyways, so they
We
wove
get to see the meet cute between Pinky and Blackgaard, which was something I never knew I needed until I was given it.
That's still another year away, Victoria. Then we
Oh.
come to Edgebiter, and I'm really glad that they wove it in as it happened, instead of doing it all retrospectively during Tom for Mayor or even Darkness Before Dawn, like I was thinking that it might. So that
Shout
happens.
out to Kurt. He was
That happens
mentioned.
pretty without incident, except Whit is like, he found out it was Edgebiter over the phone, and he was like, but I can't let them know, so we like hang up and then just like freaking out about it. So that confirms Whit is like, okay, I do know about the mineral, and he confirms that Jack also knows about the mineral, which, given the fact that apparently Mongol knows about it somehow, and Jack also knows about it, makes me think that it connects to Young Whit and the cloth mystery somehow further down in the Young Whit books. Because otherwise...
if Jack does piece together that the cloth is related to the mineral, then I'm okay with the fact that he doesn't mention it to Eugene, obviously.
Yeah.
Because Eugene is going to be so angry if he finds out that, like, he went through all the trouble of all that stuff with the station, and Whit and Jack knew. Let alone the fact that Whit knew, like, a decade earlier, and he never said, like, Eugene tells Whit, he's like, Mr. Whitaker, I figured out all this stuff, and it was just like, oh yeah, dude, I done been new for a decade.
I was going to say, like, this just further confirms that absolutely 0% of the conflict in Darkness Before Dawn would have happened if Whit had been there or anyone had even been able to phone him, which is hilarious. He would have immediately been like, oh yeah, he's after the mineral in the basement. He's known about it for 2 decades. But I didn't even think about the fact that he confirms Jack also knew about it, because Jack was there.
Yeah, that was my first thought. I was just like,
Jack
okay, if Jack knows about
Blackgaard.
this,
Jack doesn't know about Blackgaard.
He has no reason not to say anything to Eugene, because Eugene was going stir crazy.
But yeah, Whit freaks out big time. He was like, I would literally take Blackgaard to court to find out what he knows, except then I'd have to like go on record and say what I know on like legal record. And so he's like, I don't want to know. I'm really curious.
Like, honestly, if
how
Eugene...
did Whit... We never found that out. How did Whit know about the mineral? Why was he doing soil experiments in the first place? How does this connect to the cloth?
I don't know, maybe he's just weird and likes to eat dirt, like Mole from Atlantis. But, like,
so many questions.
If Whit and Jack both figured out that the mineral is tied to the Jesus cloth...
And Mongol.
Then I am okay with the fact that they haven't told anyone about it.
Yeah.
Because they are going to go through so much more crap before that series is done that, like, it is totally justified
Somehow
to me
Mongol figures it out, and that's what his...
too bad to tell anyone.
Stuff is about, because clearly his papers that Blackgaard is after is relating to the mineral, not just, like, the Jesus cloth.
Yeah.
So clearly there's some connection in there, and I don't know what it is, but my mind is going haywire over it.
Whit's like, as a baby, when the cloth was wrapped around, maybe that's the reason why Whit died as a baby. He ate dirt, and
the cloth brought him back to life, and it
then
made the dirt turn into like magic
life, and the
catalyst
dirt that came out of his mouth became magic, and somehow was teleported under
They
Whit's
put it, and then
and also into
Fiona,
the past,
Janice,
because the dirt needed to exist in the past.
Whit had like a soul bond across time and space to this dirt, and that's what drew him to Whit's End.
There's this Greek mythology story where I can't remember this dude's name, but there's like this stick that's tied to his lifeline, where like if the stick burns or is destroyed, then it kills the guy. But other than that, he's like pretty much immortal.
It's Dorian Gray.
It's kind of Dorian Gray-ish. But like imagine that with Whit and dirt.
It's Dorianus Grayus.
I can't remember what his name is.
I already told you 5 times. Anyways, so
no, the guy in Greek mythology.
Yeah, that's him. That's the guy.
No.
So and then all of a sudden, out of absolutely nowhere, Whit is just like sitting here freaking out about it, and then God just comes in like, missions, and Whit's like, that was weird, and then God's like, missions, and Whit literally starts having like a heart attack as God is just like squeezing his head in a vice. He was like, do something with missions now or I'm gonna explode your brain. And so Whit's like
and Whit's like, okay, I'm gonna call up my representative from the press, and we're gonna just set up a missions thing. And the guy on the phone is like, okay, do you want to go to the Middle East now? And it was like, you know what? I think I'll wait 10 years.
Yeah.
Even though I was just told it's important
He's
right
literally,
now. I'm just gonna wait.
Whit is on like the verge of death, and he just like picks up the phone, dials in the number, and just like starts having a conversation without even like thinking about the words he's saying. And he hangs up, and he's like, okay.
He's like, sure. I'm already so old, and I'm not even in album 69 yet.
I was like, wow, that was like God was very direct there, and kind of like just out of the blue, like set up this foreshadowing for the future in a very blunt and unsegued way.
Phil just like, I don't know how to incorporate this plot point at all.
I was like, that was just so out of the blue. I just thought it was really funny. Like,
honestly, I think it's because we just got out of like a saga, and every single book so far has just been album 5.
I know, but
now it's just kind of like all the bits that we have to do connecting between like album 5 and album 10, but we also have to do Waylaid. Just made this book very choppy in parts, because it was like we have to hit every plot beat
and all this other stuff. But it was just wild to me too that they're like, there was absolutely no need to incorporate the idea that like Whit knew years in advance that he was going to go to the Middle East for a time.
That definitely did not need to happen yet. Especially the fact that like God was like, do it now, and was just like, okay, I'll set up the company, but I'm not going to do it now.
Do it now or I'll make your head explode in 5 seconds.
I think that part felt more like a anxiety or panic attack to
I
me,
know. I was
honestly.
just like, it was just wild that it was like, that's a weird thought. And then 5 seconds later, Whit is like having a full-blown panic attack, heart attack, and God's like, do it now, listen to me. And I was like, that was got very intense. It escalated very quickly.
Go to Nineveh.
Yeah. I was surprised, a whale didn't just swallow its end. It just seemed very drastic, very fast. Anyways, so I'd honestly forgot that Blackgaard was always like playing the triple agent with Red Scorpion, because he's having the meeting with Hakeem about setting up a meeting with Red Scorpion, and then he reveals, I was wearing a wire because I'm actually trying to get in good with the European Security Agency. The reason for which isn't entirely clear. Maybe it's just like, I need to have a backup, because if this gets in over my head, then I have people who will extract me, is my best guess probably.
Honestly, all the stuff with like Blackgaard and Mustafa and the agency and the government has never made any sense to me.
It's always been a bit confusing to me. So
this book was the first time like things actually started clicking for me.
It makes a lot more sense than ever before.
Goodness, was it so convoluted.
So
no wonder I never understood.
My guess is, because Blackgaard had to get in with Red Scorpion, and he knew he was always going to betray them, and he knew that was a dangerous idea. So by doing it as a double agent for the ESA, that meant that if something went bad, he would have like a big law enforcement agency who would pull him out and like extract him if things went bad. When in reality, of course, he was a triple agent working for himself, and we find out as like a one word like wink to the readers at the end of the scene. I just blinked. I didn't wink.
Good job.
At the end of this scene, that the person he's talking to, who's setting him up with all of this, is Philby, Miles Philby, who is the ESA agent in charge of the operation in Name Not a Number, who tries to betray them and in Whit's End, and Jason foils him, and he was working with Blackgaard. So this is
was really funny
how
about
he met
that?
him. So it was already a corrupt guy he was working with, and Pinky was with him. And then this is also how he meets Frank Phillips. So literally, like, every corrupt agent in the world. Sorry, go on.
You know what was really funny about the Philby reveal?
What?
Is they kept on in the scene not saying what the name of the man
Yes.
was. And then at the end he was just like, all right, Philby. And then you could just like hear the dramatic music in your head. And anyone reading this is either A, like they've already listened
I have
to
no
all the
idea who that
episodes, and they're like, yeah, I know it's like, okay, it's Philby. That doesn't surprise me because he's corrupt as heck. And then B, if you're listening to this and like you're not far enough in the Blackgaard Chronicles to get to a Name Not a Number, you're just gonna be reading it and you'll be like, who's Philby? I don't know.
I didn't think about the fact that they were specifically leaving out his name, because they also left out Pinky's name, which in retrospect also makes sense. But I just thought they were like, we don't need to bog you down with extra character names because they're only going to be here for a scene. But yeah, at the end he was like Philby in a very like dramatic, like spiked the camera lens name reveal, which
It's so funny because there's so many
felt
like
very melodramatic.
adaptation books I've read that just have moments like that. Like the Kingdom Hearts not like light novels, I'm pretty sure have done stuff like that too.
Yeah.
Where it's just like dramatic name reveal, except for it happens at the point where if you know the source material, it's not surprising to you. And if you don't know the source material, you're like, this means nothing to me because I haven't met this character yet. So it's just like so ill-timed.
That's what
the only way it would work is if you were going through like the source material and the adaptation like concurrently. And so, like, you already knew the person, but you didn't know about their betrayal yet. But even then, you're going to have to, like, watch a different version of their betrayal anyway in the original source material. So it just, like, does not work on any level.
It's very funny to me. The same thing happened to me while I was playing Yakuza 0, because it is recommended if you're going into the series at this point, start with that one. It makes the most sense. But it is still a prequel to the original first game. So there are references to like, oh, here's setting up something that's going to happen in the future that everyone will know about if they played the game before. So it's interesting with me knowing nothing but the game I was currently playing to try and guess what things were like relevant to the future just based on like the way, how much someone was like in the way that they said it, trying to predict like, oh, this is a thing that I will understand in the future.
You know, I watched the very beginning of Crisis Core right after I finished the Final Fantasy remake.
Yeah.
And the first scene is Zack fighting a bunch of soldiers in a simulation, but you don't find it's a simulation until the...
We should get back to the story. We have a lot to
intro
talk about. We are not
done,
even close
but,
to the beginning.
It makes you fight
We're close.
Sephiroth, and then it like makes a really big deal about him entering the scene and stuff like that. And then he's just like, but I'm a good guy. And you're like, that's not ominous foreshadowing that you're going to be a bad guy.
I'm the good guy.
It was, oh my gosh.
So, yeah, Blackgaard is setting himself up now as a triple agent to betray the European Security Agency, working with Philby, who also betrayed him with it, to betray Red Scorpion. So I was like, this is a lot to keep track of. I was thinking of what Whit says to Jason in the labyrinth about, like getting lost in the maze of like plot twists. And I was like, I feel like
that was different. This is on a different level than that.
I know. I was just thinking of like the quote in general of Whit talking about getting lost in the labyrinth. I was like, I feel like I'm watching a Mission Impossible movie, and just one of the sequences where they just keep successively taking masks off, and I'm like, I cannot follow this fairly. I was like, I've heard these episodes a gazillion times, but all these new twists and connections, like trying to keep it all in my head, because I was reading this all in basically one night, right? And I'm like, trying to.
Well, I mean, I did too.
I know, but I was trying to like take notes and like keep track of the timeline and everything like that, and thread it all together. And I'm like, this is.
I will say you did a better job than I did, because there were connections to the Young Whit books that you made that I didn't, because I'm bad at remembering the names of locations in the Young Whit books.
So, Philby is like, yes, we do want you, but you do need to do a test for us first. So it's very fascinating. The test that Blackgaard needs to perform in order to prove himself to be their CI inside guy for the ESA is to go back to America and steal a laptop which has secrets on it, which Blackgaard probably doesn't even know. And it blew my mind to find out. At first I was like, it feels like they're kind of implying this. And I was like, it is literally confirmed that the laptop, the reason they were stealing the laptop, it didn't just have military secrets on it. It had applesauce on it.
That's so much funnier. Like, if you think of the scene where Whit is in the hotel room, and then he just like opens it and he's like, oh no, just
I was
applesauce
like,
on it, and he's just like, what?
I figured it out way before, and then as it unfolded, and I was like, this makes so many things make more sense though. Like, anyways, okay, so Blackgaard was stealing the laptop in order to get in good with European security.
Could you imagine if, like, European security did know about all the stuff that went down in Odyssey, and they're like, hey guys, let's haze the new guy. Let's make him go get that program but not realize it.
I'm curious if it was the ESA that was trying to steal from the US, or if it was Philby personally, who is like, I'll let you in, but personally for me, like, you have to steal this computer for me.
Honestly, if it was Philby, it wouldn't surprise me.
Well, that's the thing. Once I realized it was Philby, I'm like, I don't know if this is... Because it's a big deal if, like, the European Union, which I guess didn't even exist at this point, but, like, if European governments in general are like, hey, we're going to steal, like, some big U.S. military secrets, which, I mean, I wouldn't put it past it in general, but that's, like, a lot bigger of a statement than, like, hey, I'm this random guy and I want to steal these military secrets. Anyways,
I want to steal.
He did all of that so that he could have backup as he got involved with Red Scorpion, so he could get the funding they needed to get Mongol's papers back from the Center of Scientific Understanding about the mineral under Whit's End. There's one thing I just realized that I want from this series that I've wanted for so long, ever since I first heard album 25, and it is, give us a name to call the mineral instead of just the mineral. I want a name to call it. Please.
I mean, we'll probably get one.
They have to. I mean, I know it doesn't have an official name because it's like super top Whit secret, but Whit must have a name for it. Apart from like
they can get away without having to incorporate the Underground Railroad 3-parter. I feel like Eugene's like adventure should be enough context.
I like how Whit even posited the idea of purposefully collapsing one of the tunnels if you didn't know it had like historical significance, just to cut Blackgaard off. And I was like, what if that's the reason like the tunnel was cut off, was like not this ancient historical thing and the rectory burned down, but Whit, I was like, the structural stability is in album 50 didn't even start with Blackgaard's bomb, because Whit was the first person to set off a bomb under Whit's End.
Whit's like, can't bomb me if I bomb myself. 5 steps ahead.
Anyways, so like Philby shows up, all the layers are in here. So we now find out the reason that Whit's trip to Chicago happened for Waylaid. It ties in even further. Whit's trip wasn't just to have board meetings for UPF. It was specifically he was having meetings to set up the mission stuff at UPF based on the prompting that God gave him that would later lead him to go to the Middle East during Darkness Before Dawn. It's all connected. And with like, I must keep it a secret.
Kind of really
I can't tell Connie and Eugene.
It's so over the
That one particular element did very much. That was the one element that I was like, okay, this just feels like it's a bit superfluous. There's no plot.
No, I mean like the Middle East combined with like like you described it best as fetch quests that Blackgaard's doing just so he can get the money. Like, imagine if he didn't go through all this and instead he just got like 5 part-time jobs, and then he just started slowly filling a bunch of tip jars, like it's Tiana at the beginning of Princess and the Frog.
It's
when he
like
comes
up,
home.
and then he just keeps putting the coins in it,
Yeah,
and then
and
having
then
to smash
he-
it with a hammer to pay for others.
And then he just like smashes all his piggy banks, and that's the way he pays for Mongol. And then Mongol's ghost is watching, just like nodding approvingly. And he's like, truly, this is what I intended for my
Mongol's
successor.
ghost is like, here, I'm bequeathing you the money that you need, and it's the money that Whit gave to him from the Christmas Carol play from 1935 that he gave him for Steve's operation.
Honestly, that money would be worth so much by this point.
Anyways.
Actually, maybe not. It hasn't. It's only been like 50 years.
So we are finally into Waylaid proper, at which point we're pretty much scene for scene, line for line at this point for the rest of the book. But there still are interesting additions. Blackgaard is having his scene with Greg Kelly where he's like, "You're not trying to lie to me, are you, Gregory?" We found out that Sasha yipes when she does because Blackgaard like yanked her ear, and I was very upset about that.
I was upset about that too. I was like, I don't even like Sasha, but like, treat your cat better. That's the one thing. Like, Blackgaard's always been really nice to Sasha.
That's why I was
like no one else. And I was so upset about that. I was like betrayed by the one person you could trust.
I felt like it was just because in the original, like, Sasha just like snaps to like accentuate Blackgaard's words.
Yeah.
But like now that we're actually hearing what happened, is like, well, we have to come up with some justification as to why Sasha did that on cue.
Sasha's just like really evil and extra. So she
I know, but they're like, we
was
need some kind of plausible
to know, like, to recognize a certain tone of Blackgaard's voice,
it's
just
like,
to like hiss or something.
It's like the
that.
Headless Horseman. He trained him that when Blackgaard says a hymn, Sasha's gonna make like a snarl yelp, or a song.
Yes.
Anyways, in that scene, Blackgaard pulls off this really baller move where Greg...
he like gets a 3-pointer. He like crumbles. He throws off. He shows off his office
Greg Kelly
basketball skills by crumpling up a piece of paper dramatically and then getting a 3-pointer in the garbage can across the room by banking it off the wall. And Greg Kelly's so intimidated he immediately dies on the spot. Oh, Blackgaard was so good.
It's literally it's literally at the line where Greg Kelly says like, "The police won't find me, will they?" And Blackgaard takes the paper cup, he throws it, banks it off the wall in the garbage can, and says, "The police will never find you." I wrote,
honestly, you know what that sounds like? That sounds like something out of like a story that Jenny Nicholson would read from Wattpad.
And he was
on
really
her
big.
chat.
He was just a really large man, and he said one-liners while the Victoria, the comment I made about it, which not to toot my own horn, but I think it's equally funny to yours, is that I assume if he had missed the shot, he would have had to kill Pinky too, so no one knew what he did.
No one can know.
No witnesses.
See, the funny thing is, Pinky was watching him to keep him in check, which would mean he would have to, like, go undercover, and just, like, completely break all ties from the organization and find the money another way, just because of his sheer embarrassment of not landing the cup in the garbage can. Do you think he practiced that, like, beforehand? Do you think that was him, like, something him and Edwin did when they were little? They're like, let's throw our things into the garbage across the room.
Yeah.
When Edwin comes into Odyssey, there better be a line in Double Trouble.
I'm
where,
curious how
like,
Double Trouble, how much of that is going to get
into
put into it.
I want to know, is it only paper cups, or does this talent extend to other things? Does it only work for things that are garbage? Does it only work for things that are paper? Does it only work for cups?
Anyways.
So there's going to be a scene at, like, the little theater, or like the Edwin's theater, where he's talking to Edwin and it's really dramatic, and then he just picks up his glass cup and just like throws it into the garbage can and it smashes.
Okay,
like...
so this is about the point where I have had the realization, like I said, like, oh, the reason that they put that scene with Tasha and Donovan talking about giving applesauce to General Howell is because General Howell is going to be the person who has the laptop that was stolen, and the laptop has applesauce on it. And I was like, that is. an incredible and hilarious idea. And I was like, there's a 50% chance it's only going to remain like kind of implications and not be super explicit. And then obviously it did become a thing. So
I have one last thing.
Yeah.
If Edward is like
Edwin.
the art twin, do you think Blackgaard is the sporty twin?
He's a science twin.
But he also could be
He's also the jock.
twin.
He's a science jock.
He's a jock.
Okay, so I also thought about when Blackgaard takes the case, he flips it over, it says John Avery Whittaker. I'm surprised Blackgaard laughed so hard at it, because now having more context from the books, I'm surprised he didn't have a conniption fit solely based on the fact
Do you think it was like hysterical laughter though?
At every point in his life, he's being hounded by mysterious writings of Whit's name. Like, it's like everywhere I look, I just see like I'm defeated by cryptic like engravings of John Avery Whittaker onto things at every stage.
Do you think maybe he's laughing because he's thinking about how pissed off Mongol would be if he was still alive? Because that would make me laugh pretty hard, honestly. Do you ever just think about like how Mongol would have 50 ulcers by the time album 5 was even like not even over?
Oh no, but they also mentioned like about how like Professor M like had all sorts of trouble after the war and had to go into hiding and stuff like that, and other stuff that I thought was interesting and lends further connection to the fact that Mongol's like, well, it's interesting because if they're talking about World War II or World War I, like World War II hasn't happened yet in the context also of it, because he is German, of course. So in both World Wars, it could make sense if he had to change his name for some reason living in America, but a lot more so if he is going to later become involved somehow in World War II, which would be very interesting because he's already living in America for a while, has his kids here and stuff.
I mean, like maybe if he has family back in Germany, then
he's gonna tell the Nazis about the healing cloth.
No, I don't think that. I just think that like maybe if he does have family back in Germany, it will be like emotional ties.
Yeah,
to like
or
what's
something like that
going on.
Or he has family that does something like really bad that makes them famous, and he has to like change his name or distance himself in some way to disconnect from being known association.
But also like a lot of because I've done a lot of like World War II research, especially about the fallout of like everything after the war started for both Germans and non-Germans.
Yeah.
Germans were treated like so crappy by basically everyone, no matter where they lived in the world.
Yeah, which is why so many people changed their names.
Even if they had like nothing to do with the war.
Blackgaard changed his name, remember?
Yeah.
That was the reason they changed their name, because his dad was a Nazi or something like that.
So, like, even if Mongol has literally no family, no ties, like, nothing to do with Germany, and, like, does not at all participate in World War II.
Yeah, he might still change it. It would be hard because his accent is very thick.
On him.
So it would be a very nominal kind of change. But anyways, I digress. We have a lot to get through.
Can you imagine if, like, we finally find out what the M in Professor M stands for, and it's not Mongol?
Well, then I guess he changed his name.
It is, but could you imagine?
Yeah, it is funny because I was just thinking when I was saying the thing about like seeing John Avery Whittaker written down, which is obviously a reference to the prophecy.
I forgot about that.
Well, that's what I was saying. Like, do you remember back when we first saw that? And I was like, Victoria, this is crazy. And we were making all these jokes about how it's like some ancient thing and stuff in this very like satirical way, and it's like, man,
and then we were right.
We had no idea back then. We were so right, young and naive,
and I was so angry about being right.
Yeah,
and that rage has not left me.
And then you reviewed the Young Whit books, and then
I've
you were like,
known peace since that moment.
Anyway, so what I was getting to is Blackgaard flips over the laptop. He sees Whit's nameplate on it, and I was thinking, if Blackgaard hadn't needed the laptop himself so badly, because like that's what he was sent to retrieve. And also if he could feel assured enough that he would be able to pull this off before Whit realized he had the DoD laptop and told the police about it, I'm sure Blackgaard would have been very tempted to just tip off the police that Whit was the one who had the laptop. And like he probably would have gone to jail for the rest of his life if like they had managed to catch Whit with it before Whit confessed to having it. Because it would be very suspicious, because obviously, it's not just like, hey, we found this guy, he has the laptop, he didn't tell anyone. It's, hey, we found this guy who has the laptop that has the program that he created and specifically tried to destroy instead of giving it to the guy who commissioned it for the government that he just stole it back from. Like, literally...
And Richard definitely would have gotten arrested again.
Literally, no one would have more motive in the eyes of the law to steal it than Whit. So Blackgaard could have absolutely taken him down if he himself did not need to get the laptop back. So,
and also, what's his face? Not Philby, the
Frank Phillips.
Yeah, Phillips was already
in on it. Yeah,
telling literally every single person at the station how suspicious Whit was.
Yeah,
24/7. So this would not have helped at all.
So speaking of that, Whit is at the station. He's with Connie. Frank Phillips is like, ask him these questions. He's like, because you were a special agent, and Connie is like, genuine shock and distress. And then Whit decides to pull out a line that is in the episode. He was like, you, a special agent of the United States Department of Defense, don't even have enough clearance to even ask me these questions. And I was like, that is a very bold move, Johnny Avery Whittaker. But I love the ostentation of like, I don't have clearance to tell you that. You don't even have enough clearance to ask me that. I was like, wow.
The gall of this man.
But apparently that's true because Whit gets the laptop, realizes what it is. He's like, I wonder if my old password still works. And it does. And I was like, the 90s really were a different time. Nowadays, if you work at literally any company, it's like, if I have quit the company 30 minutes ago, they've already deleted my user file from the system. And it's like, Whit's like, I was an agent 40 years ago, and this laptop, which presumably isn't connected to the internet because I just opened it, it's not plugged into anything, and I don't think Wi-Fi exists yet. So in the internal network, so within the realm of, with the limited storage space they'd had on that laptop in 1991, or in 1990 even maybe, that means all of the usernames and passwords for every different person who could log into it must be stored like locally on this computer. So
how can it fit anything else? That'd be so much data for such an old computer.
It's either that much data or it's a very select list of people who have the clearance to log into it, and Whit is still on that list, which is very impressive.
Maybe they don't have a high enough clearance to take his name off the list.
Maybe. Honestly, I was trying to free up some space on the work computer a while ago, and I realized there was a bunch of user files for people who haven't worked there in years, and I could recognize like the user file names because I'm like, oh, I remember all these people that don't work here anymore. And I tried to delete them, and then it was like, you don't have permission to delete these user files. And I was like, yeah, I guess that makes sense that you can't just go delete other people's user files off the computer if you're not an admin, actually. You got me. You got me there, network security.
Pranked you, Dan. I deleted your user file.
This was a test, and you passed.
You don't work at the company anymore. Happy April Fool.
Anyways, so I suddenly realized, like, oh boy, as Whit was logging onto it, I was like, if Whit finds out that applesauce is on this computer, which obviously he does in like 10 more seconds, like, he is going to have some extremely strong words for Tasha and Donovan, because he already realized, he figures out like, oh, they must have bugged it. It was the agency. Like, he might even think Jason was in on the loop on it, but that's less likely, like, need to know and all. Like, it would probably only be Tasha and Donovan, but like, if he knows applesauce is here, he knows it's because they stole it from him, and he is going to have some strong words for his semi-almost daughter-in-law. And then I suddenly had the realization, like I said, this makes the episode so much more interesting because, of course, as we all know, at the end of the episode, Whit rigs the laptop to erase itself once it gets stolen. And honestly,
Whit's just going out there.
We don't even know
every single copy of applesauce.
We don't even know for sure if like Whit even had a way that if they managed to get the laptop and not have to give it away, if he even had a way to safely disarm that so it wasn't going to for sure delete itself, which, if he did keep the laptop and Frank Phillips wasn't a bad guy, would have been very hard to explain, like, by the way, I did erase the laptop. What was the point of even...
What makes me really happy knowing that Richard found out that applesauce was on the computer, because did Blackgaard end up finding out, like, at the end? That
I assume he knows, because I assume that Philby told him, you have to get this laptop. He probably found out the reason was that it had applesauce on it.
How funny would it be if the last
But
chapter of this book
I do really
was
enjoy the idea that
just
Blackgaard
being
didn't
like,
know.
So, like, why did you want this in the
Yeah.
first place? And Philby's like, oh, it had this program called applesauce, and Blackgaard's like, it had what?
I was really relishing, food sauce pun, relishing the idea of Blackgaard having no idea the entire time that applesauce was what was on the laptop.
Okay, hear me out. How delicious would this be? Philby does not want Blackgaard to know what's on the computer, and Richard and Whit, it changes up their dialogue at the end when they're erasing it, and they're just like, and Richard or Whit is just like, haha, Blackgaard, you're never gonna get the copy of applesauce on this computer, and then he's driving the car, and he just like hits a tree or something like that, and he's just like, what did you just say? Like, the fact that he would
We're coming up with a lot of powerful ideas
Whit.
today.
What?
We're coming up with a lot of powerful ideas today. So yeah, like I was absolutely floored when I had the realization of like Whit didn't just set up. I always thought it was like a very gutsy kind of like gamble of like Whit's like, I'm gonna put a thing on this laptop that is gonna delete all the government secrets. Because he said at the end, he was like, well, I didn't want to delete the government secrets, but better to not have them than have you get them. But now we know in reality, Whit was just like, I need plausible deniability to flip off General Howell and delete applesauce and make it seem like it's Blackgaard's fault. And I was like, the genius galaxy brain play by Whit to like have the laptop and see an opportunity to delete applesauce once again out of the government's hands and play it off as being part like Blackgaard's fault and not on him is absolutely genius. Oh, it's so good. It adds so much depth to like the original episode with that. I love how cohesive this series makes the Blackgaard Chronicles seem, like both in terms of Blackgaard's seemingly disparate schemes and making them part of all one long singular ploy, but also how Whit knew from the start it was this ultimate long game, and finding out that Whit at every step along the way was like recognizing like these little feints and like moves and stuff, and these continuous small moves the whole time, and was seeing how they were part of a bigger plan and not just reacting to them in real time like it seemed.
I
like that.
I don't think I said this before. I really like what they did with Pinky in this episode, or in this book a ton, because like Pinky never really made that much sense to me, because he shows up in Waylaid, Blackgaard never explains his deal, and then you never see him again, like, after that. So I really like, and also, like, Blackgaard obviously really doesn't like him.
I always assumed he just got arrested because they said that he was tied up in the car, so I assumed that he was still there when the cops came, but apparently they just killed him.
Yeah, I forgot about that. But I really like how...
They're just putting a lot of extra murder in these books, which isn't that surprising, but...
I really like how it was just like Blackgaard couldn't get rid of Pinky even if he wanted to, and Pinky had to be all there for all these things because he was spying on Blackgaard.
Yeah.
Like, I found that really, really interesting that he was just like purposely there to keep Blackgaard accountable.
Yeah, he's your
assigned
sidekick / babysitter.
Yeah. Like, I really love that. I don't know about you.
Yeah,
I thought that was great.
I didn't think about it through the context of that. Like, that's why he had to be around for all these things, because I kind of forgot about the fact that he was also, like, babysitting him for Philby. But yes, good point.
When they were like, here's the man who's just going to keep an eye on you and also be your baby guard, or, like, your baby guard. He's going to be your babysitter and your bodyguard.
When he was like, by the way, also, this is Pinky, I was like...
And then Pinky walked out, and I was just like, oh my gosh, it's all coming together.
That was every single scene up until the beginning of Waylaid. It was like, it's all coming together, and it's coming more together. It's coming even more together.
I never thought anything would make me hyped up like about Pinky of all characters in my life, but this book achieved that.
Let's have a moment of silence for Pinky.
Pinky.
So another confounding dialogue change is that instead of Blackgaard...
Also, can I just say, shout out to the moment when Blackgaard first met him, and he's like, "Is your name really Pinky?"
And he was
and
like,
Pinky was
"Duh."
like, "Yes," and he was like, "Oh, okay." Like, that was so good. He's like, "Please tell me I don't have to keep calling you that, and also my nemesis aren't gonna hear me calling you that, because it's gonna take away from my intimidation factor, like, so much."
I did enjoy, like, the added physical description of, like, Pinky having the scene and, like, having the clown nose and, like, still having, like, white grease paint, like, smeared on his neck and stuff like that. So a slight dialogue change. Instead of Blackgaard just telling Connie, like, "Oh yeah, I'm getting into the electronics business. Maybe I'll even open a store in Odyssey," a line which I assume she forgot because I think most people brushed it off and didn't make the connection about the Electric Palace, unless it was through the fact that Bart talked about, like, oh, the Webster development firm is making it. You combine that with the fact that it was built on the grounds. That it was built on the grounds, yeah. Anyways,
he said the Electric Castle
in this book,
and I paused for a moment and I was like, "No, palace, not castle."
In this case, Blackgaard just straight up says it's called the Electric Castle, which is funny because there are, like, at least one, maybe two early episodes where they do call it the Electric Castle in the show. One is 60-something. I don't remember what the other one is, but they do a couple times right after it opens accidentally call it the Electric Castle in the show as well. And they went back and forth. I assume it was just an accident in the writing and they forgot what it was called.
Connie has a bad memory. Leave her alone.
I know, but I was like, did she just forget this? Or did she and Whit then know for all these years that Blackgaard owned it while it ran in Odyssey? But they're like, there's nothing we can do about it. We can tell people, like, hey, probably don't shop there, but we do that anyways because it's Bart.
You know what? I bet the, like, slogan was on the boxes or something like that, and the second Whit saw, like, it constructed, he's like, "Yep, Blackgaard's running that. Well, not gonna tell anyone." And then he just, like, turned around and walked away.
It was like, that's another thing to just, like, internalize and not tell anyone about.
He's like, "Dear diary, today I found out about all these horrible things. You're the only one I can tell with my secret."
Please, Victoria, we know that Whit doesn't write secret stuff in his diary. Otherwise, Whit's journal episodes, when we're hearing the narration, he would talk about the cloth. Once again, we'll talk about that next episode.
"Dear diary, I'm glad I never leave anything out, and I'm such a reliable narrator. Love, John Avery Whittaker."
You can't leave a written record, Victoria. Just
No
waiting
one
for
can
someone to
know.
steal it and find it. He still keeps those in his office now, today.
What if his diary turns out to be sentient, just like his baby blanket was? What would the repercussions be?
They give Whit the tracking device, they handcuff the laptop to his arm, they send him out there. Given it came up earlier in the story, I still think it's wild that they didn't put a wire on Whit. Like, you'd think that would have been an idea. Like, I assume the only reason they didn't is because Phillips was working with Blackgaard, so why risk having extra evidence that he needs to destroy about Blackgaard's involvement? So I assume the idea is Phillips wanted Blackgaard to get the laptop because if Phillips gets the laptop back, it's going to be harder to accidentally lose it again so that, like, you know, he and Blackgaard can get away with it. So he needs Blackgaard to accidentally hostage it back so they can be like, oh no, someone got away with it again, and now they have it safely to do whatever they want with. So that's why him working is like, yeah, Whit, go out there with it. Like, don't just me take it and Blackgaard release Connie, because that would be easier. But then, you know, the police are going to know I have it. I don't want to give it back to General Howell. That's why I didn't give Whit a mic. We have it's a line from the original episode, but it's still, like, the best line in this two-parter, which is when Richard is like, this has been my plan for 2 years. And Blackgaard's like, it took you 2 years to come up with this idea. And I was like, Blackgaard, no matter what happens in this episode, Blackgaard really did win out above everyone else with that comeback.
I was thinking earlier today that I think the water gun moment might be my favorite Richard moment, at least in, like, the radio show. I don't know about the books.
I assume he didn't tell Whit just because he wanted Whit to have the most realistic reaction to it.
Yeah, definitely.
They really drew it out in
Yeah.
this.
But like, just the fact that like I just love the line, just like I didn't even want to risk breaking patrolled by a real gun because you're not worth it.
Which is in the original,
like,
yeah, but it...
Yeah, which is in the original. Like I said, it's like my favorite
yeah.
Richard moment in the radio show. But like it's such a good line.
It is.
Because
it's
he's
like...
so right. Because Whit has been lecturing him.
Yeah.
Like ever since he brought out the gun, he's just like, you're gonna ruin your life. And Richard's just like internally thinking like, shut up, old man. I already know that. I've thought about this for 2 years, like I just said. I know I would ruin my life, and I don't want to do that to me or Rachel, who I'm upset was not mentioned in this book.
That's true. I didn't even think about Rachel.
I'm always thinking about Rachel.
I know.
And I was like, where's Rachel? Is she still in jail? I need to know. Has Richard visited her? But yeah, just the fact that like Whit's giving Richard these life lessons, and Richard legitimately does not need the life lessons because he already
I did think it was
that.
funny because, yeah, I was feeling this balance of Richard's, like, wanted to be like, oh, I wish I could have told it earlier so that he would have, like, backed off a little and, like, let me get through with it more, but if I did, he wouldn't be able to act convincingly enough for Blackgaard to realize that it was real.
I think Richard enjoyed the fact that Whit didn't know, and he just, like, sprang people with his squirt gun.
I like the fact that he hit...
Blackgaard... like escaping out the door.
Wait.
And then he fell.
Wait. Okay.
You're the one who jumped to the scene in the first place.
Yeah, but we're still talking about the water gun.
Okay.
The fact that when he shot Blackgaard, he shot him in the face, and Blackgaard fell over backwards on his back, splattering with a mouthful of water.
Blackgaard was so extra. It got so unexpectedly slapstick when everyone showed up on the final scene. Speaking of which, Blackgaard, in an attempt to run away, ran up a staircase.
I also wanted to address, because you pointed out this line, and yeah, I wanted to highlight that like, you're not even worth breaking parole to get the gun.
It's such a good line.
I do like how much he was like, I'm going to build up how much I hate you, how awful you are, but then like, make you fear for your life. I want you to be genuinely scared, but then I don't want you to later, because I know you're going to live through this, I don't want you to have the satisfaction of knowing that I spent time hating you. And so I'm going to remind you that you are so worthless to me that I didn't even want to risk having any more of my life caught up in anything over like the worthless contrivance that you are to me at this point. So it's like he absolutely like built him up in awfulness and then just like spiked him down into the dirt.
It's so good because Blackgaard just is building himself up internally in this scene too, as just like, I'm the worst thing that's ever happened to Richard. Yeah. And Richard's just like, you think you're important to me?
It's
Screw
like,
you.
Did the classic
you
like
literally nothing.
I don't even know who you are.
He's like, you're so insignificant to me. You are the dirt underneath my feet, which I step on. Like, when I leave the house every single day, you are not worth ruining my life over. I'm not giving you any more say in, like, the things that happen in my life. I am done with you. And it's just, it's so good.
Yeah, it felt like it had more catharsis than it ever has before.
Like, I know a lot of people probably put, like, their favorite Richard scene, like, him making up with Tom or whatever, but I was just like... My favorite Richard scene is him just completely just like flipping off figuratively Blackgaard just by being like, I am through with you. I have a heater on in my room and I'm dying. I have to go turn it off. I'll be right back.
Yeah, I definitely have more appreciation for this scene than I ever have before now with all of the extra, like thinking through all of it and everything. So now that brings us back to my last note, which is the scene Victoria's also been trying to get at.
Can I explain this scene, please?
Please do.
Thank you.
Well, let's talk about what we get in the original audio. In the original audio, basically what we hear is Blackgaard's like, I'm going to run away. I hit a button. I get electrocuted. That's it.
Okay, so I'll say how I imagine the original scene. You tell me yours, and then I'll say what happens in the book.
Well, we have to hurry because we should give the recording a break at some point, just so it doesn't crash.
Oh, do you want to do that right now?
Sure. We'll cut and then we'll finish off the rest of it.
Yeah.
Okay, we're back. I like how we stopped like so far into the video at a completely arbitrary point, like not like in the middle or we stopped one note in my notes from the end of the summary and before talking about it as a whole, but I just didn't want to forget and then lose the recording because it was so long.
Okay, okay, the way I imagine the scene is that Blackgaard runs towards a door, maybe on a second floor, like probably not up a
It's
staircase.
a warehouse. I don't usually think about them as having a second floor.
Like, I never thought about a staircase at all. I was just thinking, like, he runs, like, just straight to a door, and then it electrocutes him, and then he might, like, collapse to his knees a little bit, but he doesn't, like, fully fall over or anything. Okay, you go.
He says, like, hatch door, which could imply the roof, but since it's a warehouse, so it's probably at least 2 stories high, I always assumed it was a trapdoor in the floor, and he, like, ran over to the wall and, like, hit a button, and he was expecting, like, the floor to open, and he would, like, go down into a tunnel.
Okay, but we both...
just, like, electrocuted, and then he just, you know, flopped over.
Yeah, so, like, we both agree that he's just running to a wall, doing a thing at the wall, and then gets electrocuted. Yes. Okay, so what happens in the book?
Well, the original definitely does not have the Foley to suggest what's going on.
I know. I don't know what Foley you imagined. I imagined a lot of, like, loud crashing noises,
it would be a lot of metal. It would be a lot of, like, hard shoe sole on metal. Clang, 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 clang. And then zappity sap. And then a whoosh. And then a lot of crumpling cardboard and maybe wood splintering.
See, I was imagining like a big crashing noise at first, and then my brain proceeded to provide me with the sound of a bowling ball knocking over a bunch of bowling pins, which was so good for me personally.
I'm picturing very over-the-top Foley, like, I think it's in the Novacom extra stuff when they talk about the scene where they did the Foley, and in the notes it said, like, Tom's peeling apples in the background, and so they added Foley of Tom peeling apples, and then when they did the listen back, they're like, is Tom cutting someone's hair? And they're like, okay, we're going to take out the apple cutting thing because it's not even mentioned in the episode, so why did we put in Foley of apples being peeled?
Okay, so what happens in the episode is, immaculate. Thank you, Phil. So what happens in the episode is Blackgaard sprints up a staircase, and then
a ladder. He climbs a ladder very quickly.
He climbs a ladder, and then he grabs a doorknob, and he tries to turn it.
It's a button. I still think it's a button.
I don't know. I read it 2 weeks ago, but like he goes up, and then he touches a thing on the wall, and then he gets zapped.
He's on a walkway. He goes up a ladder. He's on a walkway on at least the second. Maybe third, probably second. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt.
He gets electrocuted. He falls off, and then he lands on a bunch of, like,
empty boxes
for the electric palace, and he just, like,
crashes through all of them. Now, it's unclear.
And then Richard's just watching this, and then he just walks over and points a gun at him, and it was incredible.
It's unclear if this is, like, wooden boxes or cardboard boxes, because Connie and Richard smashed through wooden crates when he threw them.
Yeah, that part sounded painful, and also their limbs were all tangled up, and
it sounds extremely painful. But I was like,
Richard and Connie, it's like their limbs were tangled between each other, so they just, like, couldn't get up because they kept on trying to push away the other person to get up, so they just kept on, like,
pushing each other into, like, splintered wood boards and stuff. I was like, how?
Oh, while Whit's watching and trying to help them up.
Yeah.
And then, like, 2 pages later, describing Blackgaard running away, it was like, and then Richard and Connie finally got up, and I was like, wow, they were really stuck there, weren't they?
Like I said, there's water all over the floor. Oh no, how could this have happened?
See, I was thinking, like, at least Connie and Richard are, like, really young, so their bones aren't brittle, but, like, Blackgaard is old.
See, here's the thing.
He's really old, and all his bones are gonna break from that fall.
Richard and Connie fell into wooden crates, but I feel like if Blackgaard fell at least a story and landed in a bunch of wooden crates that he crashed through, he would have definitely died.
And also, like, even if it's just cardboard, that's still gonna hurt. And it's probably all cement flooring, so it's not gonna do much to cushion the fall.
Hurt very much. I'm like, unless it was like he barely fell before he started hitting empty cardboard boxes and he just kind of, like, slowly crushed through them to the ground, it would still hurt and, like, cushion his blow a lot. But I'm like, if those boxes hadn't happened to be underneath where he got electrocuted, he would have straight up died right there. And could you imagine that scene where he just pushes the button and Richard's like, haha, I got you. And Blackgaard just falls down head first.
Blackgaard just dies and Richard's just like, oh no.
And then Frank Phillips bursts in the door with like the Department of Defense, and Blackgaard is just like splattered like Gwen Stacy on the floor. Well, Whit still has the laptop.
Richard's just in shock and at a loss to do, doesn't know what to do, just walks over and squirts Blackgaard's corpse with a water gun.
Oh no, we need to clean this up. They move Blackgaard's corpse and then Richard has to clean the blood away by squirting furiously into like the drain, the warehouse storm drain. Okay, that got a little dark.
Gosh.
Anyways.
He's just crumpled like an accordion on the floor in a bunch of crap.
Oh no, if only we had some empty boxes to hide the body in.
Can you imagine that? Like Bart in Odyssey, just having all the boxes sent to him. Like, here's the computers, here's the
skeleton of Regis Blackgaard. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, Frank Phillips comes in.
And you know what the thing is? Bart would sell that to a science classroom.
He gets the laptop.
Skeletons are expensive.
And then Trent would get in trouble for taking it out.
And it all comes full circle. Feels like this is exactly what I wanted. Now we got Trent in these books too.
So, there's the scene that you highlighted where Frank Phillips comes in. He's like, "Nobody move! I'm double wielding."
Oh my gosh! I want to read this because this is the one thing I highlighted.
Okay, you better hurry because we're going long. And then we get the scene where like they're going away and they open the laptop.
It turned to Phillips, who pointed two guns at them. So like Phillips grabs Richard's gun and he has his own gun. And I'm reading this and I'm like, you grab Richard's gun? And then this happens. Phillips, who pointed two guns at them. All right, nobody move. Not again, Connie whimpered. Maxwell nodded at the pistol in Phillips' left hand. That's my water gun. Phillips glanced at it and tossed it away roughly. Yeah, but this one isn't. It was so good. Richard's just so tired. He just wants a nap.
So they get the laptop. I assume they must have had to put in the login to get to the video, because if you open the laptop, it plays the video immediately. That defeats the whole purpose of bringing the real laptop, because Blackgaard could have been like, prove to me it's the real laptop, show me the desktop, and Whit would have opened it, and it would have been like, haha, we just deleted it, suckers.
Yeah, I've never thought that was a good idea, but I always like assumed that Whit was just counting on the fact that like Blackgaard would try and just like get it as soon as possible.
So I'm assuming that Phillips had to put in his login as well to get it to open, so Blackgaard couldn't have done it on the spot, is what they would have presumed. So, yeah, they get away, the laptop's useless, and then Blackgaard's like, still did what I was supposed to, so he goes back to Europe, and he was like, I got the laptop, and they're like, it's empty, and he's like, you only asked for the laptop, you didn't say
really liked that, actually.
on it. And he's like,
Blackgaard's like, I did your stupid fetch quest, let me into your club.
And he was like, no, you screwed up the whole thing. This isn't what I wanted. It's not like you can get around a contract loophole. Like, I can just say no to you. And then it just happens to get a phone call right now. And he was like, oh, sure, I can meet with Red Scorpion. And
he's like, oh, hey, it's my best friend Mustafa. What's that? We're going to go get high tea later and then get facials and manis? Heck yeah, that sounds great. Later, Moofy. Okay, bye. And then he's like, you were saying gonna let me into your club?
It was a very convenient phone call.
It was.
It would be funny.
But this book was full of nothing, if not a bunch of convenient things.
It's like Gallivant.
The forest of like
convenience.
Of conveniences or whatever it's called, like narrative progression or something.
I think it's just the forest of convenience.
Yeah, I love Gallivant so much.
Yeah, that's basically what this was, yeah.
I need a horse. Oh, but I have no money to pay you with. Oh, that's okay. I only need these size 8 shoes. I have an extra pair of shoes, and I'm a size 8.
But I have a horse, or I have no horse, but I have all this money and nothing to do with it. Anyways, so Blackgaard. It would be funny if Blackgaard just faked the phone call somehow. Like, if it wasn't a contrivance, he just, like, dialed himself in his other pocket, and he was like, oh, hello, Hakeem. What? You want to meet right now? What perfect timing that I got this phone call. Thanks, bye.
Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if you did that.
And
Phillips is so done. He's like, you know what? Fine. You can be in this stupid club. Please stay away from me. I never want to see you again.
We do need you. You got in, and so you got in, and then that's the thing. Was that the preview of the next book? That part?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the last line was just like, I'm going to go meet Mustafa or something like that.
Yeah, so that part
Let me see.
was the preview from the next book. So, that was the book. It was when I got that message on Tumblr that was like, have you read the new book yet? Because there's a lot happens, and everyone's freaking out about it, and I read it, and I was like, I understand now. Because Victoria was like, that's weird. Basically, it was just waylaid, and they didn't really change anything. And then I read it, and I was like, didn't change anything. I'm 40% of the way into the book, and they haven't even done anything that wasn't new. This is exclusively
I meant, like,
new
when
content
it comes
so
to,
far.
like, the purely
Once it hits waylaid, it's mostly the same.
AIO stuff.
But almost half of the book is new content before they even start waylaid.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if the next book is going to jump right to Name Not a Number. It makes sense not only because, like, that's the next, like, chunk of actual Blackgaard stuff.
I think so.
But
it's
they've
leading
also,
up to it way too much. It might have a little bit of build-up, but...
Well, yeah. I know there's other stuff they have to put in between. Like, obviously, they have to acknowledge Edwin existing and coming to Odyssey and stuff. And they have to acknowledge the Electric Palace opening.
Mm-hmm.
But
also, oh, wait. You know what the next book is going to be?
Tom Vermeer?
Praying. The next book is going to be Homecoming, the Electric Palace opening, because we haven't gotten Homecoming yet.
Yes.
Which, if we aren't given Homecoming... Like, they've got to give us Homecoming. There's been way too much
Richard series. Content. They can't skip out on his most important episode. We have Homecoming. We have Rathbone of Contention.
Yeah.
We have Double Trouble. We have Tom for Mayor.
And we have, like, more build-up to A Name Not a Number.
So, yeah.
Because I don't think we're going to be able to fit Homecoming and both parts of A Name Not a Number.
Yeah.
And also all that other stuff.
Tom for Mayor,
so this
we do
might
need
be
to
like
incorporate quite a lot of stuff.
book.
Even though Blackgaard wouldn't show up canonically in those episodes, like, they need to really thoroughly cover Tom for Mayor because it is so very much the entire thing is part of Blackgaard's plot through and through, and it's all tied around Edgebiter, the controversy about it, and Whit has already made that connection, so that is all going to be tied in, although Whit has already left at that point.
You know what's going to happen?
Which makes sense. I guess that's why Whit...
have a bunch of supplemental scenes, which is just showing, like, what Blackgaard is doing with Mustafa.
Yeah.
And just build up, like, A Name Not a Number.
That's what I'm figuring.
And then the book after will be
They had so much stuff that was specifically leading up to Name Not a Number in this one, but I feel like we need at least one more book to cover this much stuff, because I feel like they can't focus on Name Not a Number and fit in enough stuff to thoroughly cover everything that happens up to that point.
Honestly, I just want an entire book that is just a novelization of Homecoming. Because
they can't gloss over Homecoming, because they need to really thoroughly add in, like, all of the Rachel stuff with Richard. So I feel like it's going to be a whole book up to Name Not a Number.
Also, it builds up to...
And then a book for Name
all
Not
the stuff with Tom and all the stuff with Lucy and Richard in album 25. So we need that.
Yeah.
And also, Homecoming easily... I feel like I've said this before. Homecoming easily could have been a two-parter.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, they're not going to have any problem if they want to just, like, expand Homecoming
that'll be the easiest point to, like, really flesh stuff out and not just kind of breeze through it like they did not a bite of applesauce, One Bad Apple.
You know what? It might be like how Eugene's Dilemma was just, like, really, really long, and Connie Goes to Camp was, like, 5 paragraphs.
Well, clearly, out of all of these things, the most important one to expand on the most is going to be Homecoming, because, like, this series has put so much time into Richard as a character and really getting into his psyche and his motivations and his relationship with Rachel. So they're really going to want to lean heavily on the time that they put into Homecoming, more so than the plot-related stuff.
Up, right?
Definitely.
I just really need more content.
This book is a 5 out of 5 for me, by the way. Blew my mind a billion times.
Honestly, I think it's because I read it so fast. I was also really tired at the time. I never somehow caught on to the fact that, like, applesauce was even on the laptop that they were looking for. And like all the implications.
Why did you
that
think
came
Whit
with
had a
that.
panic attack when he saw what was on the computer? He
I
was
don't
like,
know,
"Oh
just government
no, they did." He
secrets.
like it said like his heart was broken. It was like italicized. He was like, "They didn't. How could they do this?"
Yeah, I read that and I was just like, whoa, must be pretty intense what's inside that laptop.
They stole
YOLO.
from that. They said they stole from General Howell, who was only mentioned earlier when Tasha said that she had to give him applesauce.
Honestly, there were so many names and I couldn't be bothered to follow. But I was just very confused. It did clear up a lot of things for me. I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. I really enjoy it. Blackgaard was the star of this book for me.
I also
Easily. I
enjoyed
really liked all the scenes.
when Tasha reads the file on Red Scorpion and Mustafa.
I also really like Tasha in the book.
We only ever like have heard Mustafa as like just the singular name for him, so I like that when Tasha read his file, she was like, Mustafa, just the one name, huh? Guess he thinks he's pretty special. I was like, yeah, drag him. Like, I like, because I feel like the fact that they only gave him one name was probably just meant as just kind of like, we didn't feel the name to like come up with this, like a first or last name, whichever one it is for him. And then in this, they're like, we're going to justify that by saying like, oh, because he's a leader of like a terrorist cell. And he's one of those people who's like so self-important that he was like, I only have one name. I am Beyonce. I am Cher. I am Madonna.
I am Mustafa. Honestly, every time I hear his name,
Mitch,
I just think
whatever
of
your
like
last name is.
I think of like Shanzi in Lion King, where it's just like, ooh, even the sound of Mufasa's name scares me. Mufasa, Mufasa. But like in Homecoming, for example, there's like a ton of scenes that are cut. Like, and by ton, I can only usually think of like the one where it's Connie. And Richard's reconciliation scene that's cut.
Yeah.
And honestly, there could be a bunch of like scenes
cut as in
between
it's
Richard
mentioned
and
that
the
it
other
happens, but
characters.
it's off camera, off mic, you mean?
Like, there are a bunch of scenes between Richard and the characters that he apologizes to that like could be expanded upon. Also, another apology we never got, Nicholas and Richard. That wasn't in the episode. I would really enjoy reading that.
And Nicholas is like, that's okay. You inspired me to turn into a supervillain, so everything's okay now.
And Richard's just like, you're always such a joker, kid. I'll see you later. And then
I liked
later.
When someone on the TOO once was trying to posit that Nicholas in The Power was a different Nicholas than Nicholas
Adamsworth.
I remember
telling you that.
Yeah, and I was like, so you think
same voice actor.
You think there's two Nicholases with the same voice actor who are both super tech genius like prodigies with a penchant for hacking.
And the same age.
Well, I mean, there's a good time gap between Album 17
and
and 5.
He would be the same age if it was him.
He felt like he was basically the same age. I feel like that was the impetus for people thinking he was a different Nicholas. It feels like he's the same age between those episodes.
Not that many years have passed. No, it feels like more. The years can be confusing. The way I try and like figure out what year
can be confusing.
The way I try and figure out
Victoria's hot take on Adventures in Odyssey. The years can be confusing.
Shut up. The way I try and figure out how many years have happened between albums
Christmas
is
episodes.
I try and keep track of Christmas episodes chronologically.
Yeah.
And that's how I sort what year things have happened in, and then also characters mentioning dates.
I also remember
clearly, like Richard saying how long he's been in the detention center.
I remember specific years when some things happen, but yeah, Christmases is another good thing to go off of.
Yeah. I find that's easiest for me to keep track of.
Rarely a year without a Christmas episode.
Exactly.
And early
that's
on,
what I'm counting
none of them, because they hadn't run out of ideas yet back then.
So scenes
that wasn't even supposed to be a dig on like repetitive episode ideas. It's just like there are so many Christmas episodes and you've been doing it for a long time.
Okay, scenes I want from Homecoming that aren't in the original episode. Connie and Richard reconciliation. I know I said it's not necessary in the episode because they get along as well as they can in Waylaid, kind of. She knows he's not bad, so they don't really need it. 2, Nikki making up with Richard in the only way they can, I guess. I guess he accepts Richard's apology. He's probably too intimidated not to. We would know if he didn't. 3, Rachel and Richard. I need it. Do you have any?
Well, I just added 7 Rachel scenes, so that's the big one.
Like, I
Really.
can't be the only one who really wants Rachel. You do too, right?
I mean, who else would he apologize to? Maybe Rachel the horse. I feel like he should apologize to the horses directly
should.
because he has a very direct emotional connection with Rachel and not really with Leah, which is kind of funny because it still just continues to play into the same joke about Jacob's wives.
Do you think, like, they change up? I feel like they've got to change up at least a little bit Richard's apology to Tom. Because
Yeah.
Richard,
Well, also
like,
because
setting
they're
the
going to
barn on
want to
fire
really
was
flesh
so
it
much more
out
complex.
because they're like, we have room to put more in here, and this is our bread and butter of character development all the way through to the end of the saga. So
Yeah. And then I just want Richard to be like, no, you don't understand. I never did a fire safety course in my life, and my shirt set on fire, and I'm really stupid, and I'm a himbo, and please
you don't
help.
understand. I'm just dumb. I tried to save the horses.
I tried to save the horses,
You
but
don't
I
understand
accidentally
the
set
emotional
myself
trauma
on
I
fire
have.
instead. I messed up so bad, Mr. Riley. You cannot even comprehend how badly things went.
You literally would not believe how bad I am at not starting fires.
Can you imagine what happened if he purposely, like, tried to set a building on fire? Like, how chaotic that would be. Either it would be the biggest fire ever, or it just wouldn't work.
I assume it wouldn't work.
Because he didn't mean to set, like, Blackgaard's castle on fire either, did he?
I feel like he did.
Like, he
because the
maybe
fire
did.
alarm went off and he was like, and now what's that mean? The building's on fire. So, like,
I always took that to mean either, like, 50-50, he meant to do it, or he was just like, hey, building's on fire, that's pretty funny.
I always assumed that he intended it to do that because he knew all the circuits were going to overload. I never considered the possibility that it was not his intention entirely.
Honestly, he probably did it on purpose, but the idea that he just sets on fire every single place accidentally is so funny to me.
I mean, because if that wasn't his intention, then what would his intention be? To just be like, haha, Blackgaard, I made all the machines turn on. Surprise! You got me. There's not really any other kind of gotcha there if he wasn't going to burn the building down. Okay,
he's like, haha,
now you can
I turned off all the machines, and now you're going to have to wait half an hour for them to reboot. And Blackgaard's like, I hate you so much,
okay,
why
don't
did
push Zapazoids over on me, and I just lay here until someone comes and gets me out of it while the building isn't, like, in flagration.
Well, my leg crunches, as described by the book, as I try to claw myself out from under Zapazoids in a horrific manner.
Much less funny than what I described, where he was all lubed up with cologne and it went over and he slid like a banana peel and went and shot out like a cannon. Pinged like a pinball.
Slid out the front door and into a police custody car.
We literally have already been through these jokes already. We could rehash them because they're very funny. And it was a long time ago.
It's time for us to stop, clearly.
Yes, because there's nothing we do well as taking a joke we made years ago and driving it into the ground to death. So, that's the book. It was very good. I'm very excited for the next one.
Who's your favorite character in the book? If you have to rate the Blackgaard book so far, I think this is the 5th one?
This is the 5th one. I think this might be my favorite book so far.
My favorite one's the 3rd one.
The one with all the Richard stuff, yeah.
The Richard one.
Yeah, just on a character
with, like, all
level, the writing on that was
backstory.
fantastic. That one, and then this one, just because it did such an interesting way in the way that it, like, reimagined the plot lines to connect them together, even more so.
Also, I will say, 3rd one, I did give a 5-star rating on Goodreads. Love you, Phil. Thank you for that episode. Very good.
So is that everything for this episode? Do you have anything else to add?
If I had to say my favorite characters from each book, first one, Glossman, because that had all of Glossman's backstory stuff. It was
very
unexpected.
Surprising. There was no better way to start the series in a way that floored us with, like, shattered expectations than making a sympathetic backstory for Philip Glossman.
Honestly, I think that was the best way to start this story,
because it set the tone
because it really set our expectations.
You have no idea what's going to happen.
And it just, like, completely, like, knocked our feet out from under us,
Yeah.
and in like the best way.
It did, yeah. It
Book
was a great
two-
primer for what to expect from this series.
Connie,
Well,
I guess.
except for
Either-
maybe like there's a prophecy and Blackgaard is like going off of this super old German guy who hated Whit when he was a kid, like Dennis the Menace's like research notes from like arcane mystical religious artifacts so that he can use the dirt under Whit's end this whole time to like try and recreate a healing cloth that the professor was trying to use to heal his son that he thought Whit was like holding out on him because
I don't think you breathed it all for the last 30 seconds.
No, so I don't think it primed us for that part. But the rest of it, yeah.
Nothing
really
could have primed us for that. Second book, I don't really remember super well. I'd say either Connie, Eugene, or Richard was my favorite. Third book, Richard, obviously. Fourth book, Richard, again, I guess. There wasn't that much new Richard stuff. It was mostly like Whit POV and Blackgaard POV.
This one, Blackgaard, probably.
This one was Blackgaard for me, definitely. This one had a lot of really good Blackgaard stuff. And only had Richard's
POV
once. We had a lot of
interesting scenes, tons of new Blackgaard scenes. We had the baller moment where he dunks the paper in the garbage.
Do you think internally when he did that, he was just thinking like, man, I'm so cool?
Well, it's also, he did that and then immediately like, the police, don't worry, Gregory, the police will never find you. Like,
Do you think he did that and he was just like,
injury.
Man, I'm so much cooler than Whit.
Pinky drags him out of the room, closes the door, and he's just like...
Do you think he was just like, oh my gosh, I was sure I was going to miss?
And that was when Blackgaard invented dabbing. In his sheer excitement, he invented dabbing in the ecstasy of that moment. The two coolest moments in the book were Blackgaard doing that, and then Whit being like, you don't even have the clearance to ask me these questions.
Okay, but like these two self-entitled old men thinking they're the coolest things in the world is so funny to me.
Oh, yeah, that's good. So...
Okay, but like you're joking when you said that was cool of Blackgaard though, right?
I mean, I thought it was cool. He like...
No!
He did the shot and then he dropped like this oh ho, like one-liner, like, I mean, it's pretty transparent. Greg Kelly really should have figured out
There's
that
nothing
Blackgaard was about
scary about
kill
throwing your cup in the garbage can. It's scarier not to. That means you're littering.
Yeah, I know. It is very funny. Like, I mean, it's like a cool move in general. I'm saying in the context of what Blackgaard did, it's absolutely ridiculous because he was being very like the tone of his voice in the episode,
like,
he was
honestly,
like, yes. He was like,
I could just imagine like Richard teaching him to do that. Like if you want to properly
the grave
intimidate.
baritone that he has in that scene melded with him throwing it is like the most discordant imagery in the world.
Like if Richard was in that room and he was watching that, he would straight up bust a gut laughing. The only two people in the world that trick would intimidate are like Greg Kelly, which is why it's really good he did it, and Glossman. Like I bet that would terrify Glossman.
It could not have been like more discordant of a tone if Blackgaard had been wearing Pinky's clown outfit while he delivered the line. It's the same level of absurdity. Anyways, we need to end this episode because it's 1:45.
Yeah. It's 1:45 for me.
Yeah.
I have a meeting in the morning.
So I have to work in the morning. So, what are we doing next time, Victoria? You know what one of the next episodes is because I've been talking about it.
The OAC stuff. So Young Whit, which we kind of already touched on. Sorry if you haven't listened to it yet. And then the Bridget Redefined. Is that what it's called?
That is correct.
I haven't listened to it. I'll have to.
So those are what we're talking about next time. Getting even to more book content next time, even though it's not a book, it's an episode. Excuse me. But it's basically just a short Young Whit book.
Honestly, listening to that, I was just like, man, I wish the books were radio shows.
I'm glad that they're longer, because this was a lot shorter and just like right to the point compared to the books, which have a lot more like actual plot going on.
Sexism can't wait, Devin. We need
to get rid of it now. It can't wait, right? And it can't wait till a week later. Ben.
Also,
I love you, Ben,
depending on when this episode comes out, go vote, people.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I probably won't get this episode out by the time.
Okay,
Well,
then,
no, I will actually. It's next weekend, isn't it? Okay, yeah. Actual voting is, yeah.
Go
you're
vote
right.
if you live in America and you're of age and you're able to vote.
And you're not voting for Trump.
Yes. If you are voting for Trump, don't
Then
go
don't
vote.
vote. It's that easy. So that's what we're doing next time.
Do you have any idea how easy not doing something is?
It's great.
It's very easy.
Yeah, as John Mulaney tells us.
Unless you're not going to vote for Trump, then go vote.
So next time, that's what we're doing next time. This has been, I'm Devin, also known as Dr. Blackgaard. This has been the Adventures in Odyssey Oddcast.
I didn't say goodbye. Goodbye.
You don't say goodbye till afterwards anyways, and you never say your name anyways. So what's the point, Victoria?
You're so mean tonight.
I'm cutting out the middleman.
You need to go to sleep. You need to take a nap.
Oh, goodbye.
Goodbye.